Welcome to my channel. Before starting the video, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button and give this video a like up. Come get the most recent Duggar family news. There are moments in life when we simply need to stand back, not because we're in awe, but because Catastrophe in the San Fernando Valley, there was peace. The pre-dawn light filled the still sleeping heavens at 4:38 a.m. On a Friday, the kind of morning that Jeremy Vuolo liked, and the streets hummed with the strange rhythm of early risers and the pulse of street lamps. Vuolo is a seminary graduate, a dedicated father of two, and a former professional soccer player. As his wife Jinger fell asleep, Jeremy gently got out of bed. With a soft kiss on her forehead, he walked elegantly past the nursery, where their girls were still blissfully oblivious. He was able to recharge his retreat from the world, re-establish his relationship with God, and return to the house he loved by going north on a solitary trip through the forest for a few days, all just outside Sacramento. Outside the window, the softly sloping hills of the Central Valley sank gradually toward the horizon as Vuolo's morning journey became, though it never happened, the most horrifying event in his family's history. On the passenger side of the stereo, the Bible was playing gently. The vehicle struck Jeremy's SUV on the driver's side, causing it to crash into a steel guardrail and crumple like paper. There was a terrible silence as the car fell in on itself, the engine snaring glass and exploding. Jeremy was unconscious and buried beneath the dashboard when paramedics came, and his left leg was bleeding from two distinct locations. When she picked up the phone at 7:02 a.m., his right leg twisted under him, and something inside of her broke despite the nurse's calm voice. He was hobbling, breathing heavily, and his chest was buckling and hammering when they used hydraulic shears to lift him to a level 1 trauma facility in Bakersfield. "Ice, your husband had a serious accident," was what was said. "Right now, we need you here. Don't drive alone, please." The sound of frenzied footsteps, the jumbled shuffle of car keys, and a solitary, hushed prayer replaced her scream as she hung up the phone. She contacted her father, her sister, and her pastor because she was so shocked and incredulous. After 2 hours, she went to Jinger's makeup smeared and her hands shook as she stood outside the yard. She gripped her phone as if it were her only source of assistance. They were getting ready for Jeremy's surgery. Doctors used titanium rods to strengthen and decrease the left femur after traversing through several levels of destruction. Regretfully, there are several tiny hairline fractures on his tibia. He had survived the first impact, vicious, unrelenting, and uncertain, but the journey ahead would be long. She was unable to identify his face when she eventually saw him since he had passed about a liter of blood and had bruises all over his lungs. There were cuts all over his arms, and he had likely broken a few ribs. His pupils enlarged. He was surrounded by cables and gauze, and the sound of beeping machinery produced a horrifying soundtrack of manufactured life as she knelt down and prayed. "Is he going to live?" Holding her hand tenderly, the nurse muttered, "We suppose he will still. It will take some time." Jeremy and Jinger stood firmly at each other's sides as everyone else attempted to tear them apart. They first crossed paths in 2015 when Jinger was inspired to think more profoundly, love more passionately, and live more freely by Jeremy, a dynamic and expressive pastor. Jinger, a devoted daughter of the Duggars, was gradually coming out of her extremely traditional background. Despite being total opposites and soulmates, they came together to forge a new rhythm based on honesty, faith, and an unbreakable connection. After relocating to Los Angeles, they made a fresh start and had 2 daughters. They persevered in the face of scrutiny, rumors, and religious persecution. The first night was the most difficult. Jeremy was terrified when she woke up, but she stayed still, knees to her chest, curled up on the tiny guest sofa, and held her husband's hand while counting his breaths. Stayed quiet during intubation. He appeared scared when he turned to her, and his throat hurt. Suddenly, once more, things came to a halt. As he spoke, his voice broke. "You stayed." In return, she muttered, "I'll always stay." It was weeks before he was able to sit up, days before the entire extent of his injuries could be assessed, and 12 days following the event before he was able to walk once more. Jeremy started the physical treatment. He saw every movement as though it were a flame tearing across his skeleton. I felt sick when I stood up. A group of nurses were summoned when I sat up. But he continued, Jinger by his side, grimacing with everyone. From behind the therapeutic glass, she could see his anguished screams with every breath. She counted his reps more often than not, though occasionally her voice trembled with hope. She informed their girls that their father was being very Duggar, prayed with them every night, and painstakingly documented each X-ray in a diary. She ripped herself apart behind closed doors. I ran the kids around the living room on alternate days, but I never knew if I would ever see him sprint again. I was unable to look away from that broken photo, and what if I lost him? As they grew older, how would I direct their guidance? I felt like I was having trouble breathing for weeks. When she eventually stopped, tears of soft honesty fell down her cheeks. He never gave up fighting in spite of everything, and I couldn't either. Once a week their daughters, too small to comprehend, visited the hospital. Even though such visits became sacrosanct, they made others laugh with their handcrafted cards and drawings. Despite his wounds, he remained resilient and would pretend to tickle them with his unbandaged hand while grinning and crying. Their faith had never been put to the test more, but as Jeremy would later clarify, love also abides by these guidelines. The couple never issued updates, instead asking for prayers. In spite of what may have been a marathon, Jerry started walking in the spring with the aid of parallel bars, and the room erupted in applause as Jinger sobbed uncontrollably while burying her face in a caregiver's shoulder. He only moved 5 feet today, but Jinger wrote in her journal, I have never believed in miracles more important. From friends, clergy, fans, and even estranged Duggars, messages were pouring in. Everyone had something to say about how Jinger's support taught us all about love and how Jeremy Vuolo is a great example of tenacity. A year later, they've changed, improved, shrunk, and become more lively than before. Jeremy continues to walk, teach, drive cautiously. His scars act as reminders, and he and Jinger have founded a nonprofit to support traumatized families in spite of his disability. They continue to help one another and meet virtually. Tell your tale and say a prayer. They see what is worth fighting for, even when they don't present a flawless picture of life. Even when the lights go out and the house is dark, Jinger always puts her head on Jeremy's shoulder before bed. His bandaged and injured arm now envelops her tenderly. They've already survived the storm together, so they don't need to say anything more. This episode is for you or a loved one who is recuperating from a life-altering accident. Please leave a comment with your opinions if you liked the video and subscribe to the channel to keep in touch. We are available to you.